The thing about betrayal is that it rarely arrives loudly. It comes quietly, in smooth voices and clean silverware. My wife smiled as she lifted her champagne glass, and for a moment, I believed everything was normal. But 3 days later, I saw the truth printed in neat black numbers on my phone screen. The bank alert came at 6:47 a.m. I was halfway through my first coffee. The screen lit up. $15, 274.88 charged to your card, Bluemont Garden rooftop. My hand didn't shake. I didn't curse. I just stared at the number like it was a stranger tapping my shoulder. Bluemont Garden. Of course. That was where Denise's birthday dinner took place. White tablecloths, live jazz, custom calligraphy menus. I remember asking the valet if he'd ever parked so many black cars in one night. I thought Maribel had used her own account. She'd told me she was handling the reservations. But as I scrolled through the itemized charge, I saw the breakdown. 22 guests, $645 per head, plus drinks, decor, entertainment, and something called a champagne gratitude ritual for $800. I didn't even know what that meant. I sat there, coffee going cold, letting the heat of quiet fury rise in my chest like steam from the cup. When I asked Maribel about it that evening, she was brushing her hair at the vanity. Her robe was loose. Her mood was light. I kept my voice steady. I asked her if she had any idea why there was a $15,000 charge on my card. She didn't flinch. She just smirked, as if I'd asked her why the sky was blue. It was for the whole family, she said. Don't ruin the vibe, Julian. You're making it a thing. She turned back to the mirror and continued applying lip gloss like I'd asked her to pass the salt. That was the moment something clicked inside me, not snapped, not shattered. Clicked. Like a door being closed and a lock sliding into place from the inside. I didn't answer her. I didn't need to. I walked into my home office, closed the door, and opened a spreadsheet titled, This Ends Now.xlsx. I had started it months ago, almost as a joke. A quiet list of the little things that didn't sit right. The time she bought her cousin a $900 necklace and told me afterward, "Oh, I just used the card since you always say it doesn't matter." The time she used my miles to fly her brother Noel and his girlfriend to Miami, saying, "Well, we weren't going to use them anyway." I'd written it all down. I just hadn't done anything about it. Until now. I started with the recent charges. Then I pulled bank statements going back 5 years. Every spa day, every brunch, every oops, I forgot to ask. And I remembered how many times she'd smiled at me afterward like she was doing me a favor by telling me it all. I opened my work laptop and emailed a friend of mine from college. He's a divorce attorney now. We hadn't spoken in a while, but he replied fast. "Happy to help, man. Just send over everything." I did. I sent the charges, the screenshots, even a picture of Maribel holding the birthday cake with "Happy Birthday, Denise," from all of us, written in gold leaf on top. I didn't sleep that night. Not from rage. From clarity. I realized I had trained myself for years to be okay with less. Less respect. Less honesty. Less truth. I had accepted it like a dog trained to flinch at raised voices. I thought I was being supportive. That's what she always said. "You're the rock of the family. You make things possible. We're lucky to have you." But luck doesn't drain your savings and then ask you not to ruin the vibe. The next morning, I went about my routine like nothing happened. I shaved, made coffee, packed my laptop. Maribel kissed my cheek and told me she'd be going to Pilates and then brunch with her mother. "We'll probably swing by Camila's to drop off the leftovers," she added. I nodded. Sounds good. I didn't mention that I had just frozen the joint credit account and forwarded the last 5 statements to my attorney. I didn't say that I had booked a consultation with a financial advisor for Friday. I just kissed her back and walked out the door. That day, I worked in complete focus. No distractions. No emotional fog. I made calls, closed deals, wrote clean code, responded to emails within seconds. For once, I wasn't trying to juggle resentment and performance. I felt light. On the way home, I stopped by a hardware store and bought a small safe. I planned to move my important documents, passport, and personal files out of the shared drawer she often rifled through. It was strange how calm it all felt. No storm, no shouting match, just quiet reorganization. When I got back home, the house was empty. I installed the safe in the back of my closet, behind old coats I never wore. I moved the laptop with the spreadsheet into it. I checked our joint accounts. She hadn't noticed the freeze yet. I gave it 48 hours, tops. When she did, there would be a storm. But I was ready. I was done being the human checkbook. I was done smiling through jokes about being the quiet guy who keeps the lights on. I was done being the wallpaper of someone else's gallery. That night, we watched TV. She curled up beside me, talking about a new art installation opening downtown. She wanted us to go with her parents. I nodded, took a sip of my drink, and smiled. I'd already started moving money into a separate account. I'd already changed my login credentials. I'd already drafted a letter to her family's favorite restaurant, the one I always paid for, to cancel our next reservation. She kept talking. I kept sipping. As she laughed at something on the screen, I studied her. Elegant. Beautiful. The kind of beauty people compliment with a hint of envy. But to me, in that moment, she looked different. Not because of how she looked, but because I no longer saw her through the same filter. I didn't see a partner. I saw someone playing a role she'd rehearsed so well, she didn't realize the audience had already left the theater. I didn't say anything that night. I just looked at the woman beside me, the candle flickering on the coffee table, and the bank alerts still sitting unread on her phone. And I thought, this time, I won't let it go. This time, I won't pretend. I won't apologize for noticing. I won't defend common sense. And I definitely won't ruin the vibe. But I will end it. It wasn't the first time she used my card without asking. That was the part that stuck with me more than the number itself. 15,000? Sure, that's outrageous. But it wasn't new. It was just louder. A bigger version of a pattern I'd spent years calling love, compromise, generosity. A pattern I excused because I didn't want to look petty or stingy or like the husband who kept receipts to win arguments. But I did keep receipts. All of them. Not just the paper ones, but the memories too. And they never stopped stacking up. I remember one summer evening, years ago, when her brother Noel had just broken up with his girlfriend. He was miserable. Maribel said he needed cheering up. I agreed. We all need moments of kindness, right? I thought she meant a movie or dinner. Maybe a bottle of wine. Instead, she booked a weekend for him and a friend at a beach resort and handed me the itinerary like it was a birthday card. He's family, she'd said, kissing my cheek. And we had the points. No, I had the points. I had spent 4 straight months flying cross-country for work to rack up those points. But I said nothing. I told myself it was fine. Then came the lease for her cousin Camila's SUV. It's in our name, she said. But she's going to pay the monthly fees. She didn't. Camila made 3 payments, then vanished into a new relationship in Arizona. I paid off the rest quietly to protect my credit score. Maribel apologized with cupcakes and back rubs, said she didn't know Camila would flake. And I believed her. Because I wanted to. That's the thing about being the one who makes things happen. They expect you to fix everything. And when you stop fixing, they say you've changed. The more I thought about it, the more it became clear Maribel had built a system. Not consciously, perhaps, but efficiently. A system where every family event, every crisis, every minor inconvenience had a simple, dependable solution. Me. Need new furniture before guests arrive? Call Julian. Need emergency cash after an argument with a boyfriend? Text Julian. Need someone to cover the deposit for a vacation rental because Denise forgot her wallet again? Let Julian know. And every time I brought it up, I was made to feel like a miser holding the family hostage with numbers. Why do you always make it about money? She would ask. I wanted to scream, because you do. Her family had this way of wrapping guilt in warmth. They'd toast to my generosity at dinners, then hand me the check. Denise would compliment my taste in wine and then suggest I bring a few bottles to her next book club. You have the eye, Julian, she'd say. I just know you'll pick the good stuff. And I would. Because deep down, I thought that if I kept saying yes, they'd see me as part of the circle. Not just Maribel's husband. Not just the provider. But someone they truly respected. What I didn't realize then was that they didn't need to respect me. They only needed me to stay useful. I'd grown up differently. My family was quiet, working class. My dad fixed cars. My mom worked nights at the hospital. Birthdays were pizza and paper plates and laughing until someone dropped cake on the floor. We didn't have calligraphy menus or personalized linen napkins. We had love, and we had limits. I never once saw my parents ask anyone else for money. Not out of pride, but principle. So when I married into Maribel's world, I thought I was upgrading. I thought I was lucky. But somewhere along the line, I stopped being a husband and started being an investor. The only difference was, I never got dividends. Just more expectations. And when I hesitated, even slightly, Maribel would give me that look, equal parts disappointed and amused. Come on, she'd whisper. Don't be weird about it. As if being careful with money was a social disease. As if asking questions made me fragile. There was one charge I remembered vividly. A boutique in Manhattan. I got the alert while I was in a meeting. I texted her, confused. She replied, "Oh, I needed a dress for Denise's gala. It was a little pricey, but so worth it. You'll love it." That dress cost nearly $2,000. When I saw it later that week, I smiled and told her she looked amazing. What I didn't say was that I had postponed upgrading my laptop to cover it. That I'd canceled a weekend getaway I'd planned for us to balance the books. She never asked about those things. And I never offered. Because somewhere deep inside, I had started believing that her happiness was worth more than my comfort. Until now. Now, as I sat staring at the spreadsheet, I saw it all clearly. It wasn't about one dinner. It wasn't about $15,000. It was about erosion. Tiny, constant erosion of boundaries. Of dignity. Of partnership. I had become a silent ATM in a designer marriage. But the thing about erosion is, it's only silent until something collapses. I poured myself a drink that night and sat on the balcony. I thought about the words she said when I brought up the charge. It was for the whole family. Don't ruin the vibe. That sentence played in my head like a song I couldn't turn off. Not just because of the words, but the tone. The assumption. The way she said it as if I were the problem. As if the absurdity wasn't spending someone else's money without asking, but questioning that decision. I imagined what would have happened if I had done the same. If I had charged 15 grand to her card for a golf trip with my buddies. If I had told her afterward, don't ruin the vibe. She would have called her mother, her sister, her lawyer, maybe even a therapist. But when she did it, I was expected to smile and swallow it like a vitamin. No thanks. I'd had enough. So I wrote everything down. Every dollar. Every date. I created a column just for gifts disguised as favors. Another for emergencies that mysteriously involved jewelry. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't planning to humiliate her. I was planning clarity. I wanted the full picture. I wanted to know, without a shadow of doubt, that I wasn't crazy. That I hadn't just imagined it all. And the more I saw, the more I knew I hadn't. I had been more than generous. I had been foolish. But I wasn't going to stay that way. Not anymore. I'd been quiet for long enough. I'd been useful for long enough. I was done sacrificing my peace on the altar of appearances. And as I saved the file that night, I whispered to myself, not in anger, but in decision, this ends now. Brunch always had a strange smell. Not the food, but the atmosphere. The kind of curated smiles and empty laughter that told you everyone was trying just a little too hard. The morning after I finalized the spreadsheet and spoke to my lawyer, I found myself at one of those brunches again. The ones where Maribel glowed like a hostess on a cooking show, floating from plate to plate like she'd been born with a flute of champagne in her hand. We were at Eloise's, a place where the napkins were folded like orchids and the cheapest mimosas still cost nearly $50. I didn't argue when she told me we were going. It'll be light, she said. Just family. They want to thank us for the dinner. Us. That word, heavy with selective credit. I nodded, put on my cleanest navy blazer, and followed her out the door. Let them have their charade. I had already prepared mine. We arrived to the usual chorus. Denise greeted us with a kiss on the cheek and that rich people laugh that starts in the throat and never quite touches the eyes. Julian, my darling financier, she cooed. The man of the hour. I smiled politely and took my seat next to Lawrence, who smelled like tobacco and old stories. He raised his glass to me. You sure made your mother-in-law's night one for the books, he said. A hell of a gesture. I didn't correct him. Let them toast. Maribel looked radiant, as always, flawless curls, earrings that caught the sun, a voice that floated through conversation like a trained soprano. She leaned in once and whispered, "Thank you for not making it weird." I didn't reply. I just adjusted the cuff of my shirt and glanced at the time. At precisely 11:32 a.m., a tall man in a tailored gray suit walked through the restaurant entrance. He had a small stack of envelopes in one hand, and a quiet kind of confidence that cut through the room's artificial cheer. He walked directly toward our table, past waiters, past the string quartet playing some soft jazz in the corner. No hesitation. No smile. He stopped just behind Maribel, cleared his throat politely, and said, "Mrs. Maribel Cross?" Her back straightened like she'd been struck by static. She turned, eyes narrowing. "Yes." The man held out a white envelope. "You've been served." And just like that, the air shifted. The sound of forks paused. Even the violinist missed a note. Maribel stared at the envelope as though it had grown thorns. She didn't reach for it at first. She looked at me, lips parted in something between confusion and panic. I gently sipped my coffee and said, "You're holding up brunch, darling." Slowly, with shaking fingers, she took it. The man nodded, turned, and walked out. Silence stretched across the table like a spilled drink. "What the hell is this?" Lawrence finally asked. Maribel was flipping through the pages, her expression darkening with every paragraph. Denise leaned in. "Is this a joke?" she asked me, her tone teetering between brittle politeness and restrained accusation. "Because if it is, it's not funny." I set my cup down and calmly folded my napkin. "I told her not to ruin the vibe," I said. Then I stood up. Maribel's voice cracked as she called after me. "Julian, wait. What is this?" But I didn't turn back. I walked out slowly, letting each step land with purpose. Outside, the sun was bright. I breathed deeply, the weight of restraint lifting with each exhale. No screaming. No scene. Just precision. I had told her I wouldn't let it go. She just didn't believe me. By the time I got home, the calls had already started. First from Maribel, then her mother, then Lawrence, then her cousin Camila, who hadn't spoken to me in 2 years but suddenly found herself inspired to mediate. I let them all go to voicemail. The document Maribel received was not divorce papers. Not yet. It was a formal demand for repayment, a detailed statement from my attorney itemizing every unauthorized transaction made in my name over the past 3 years. It included interest, notes, screenshots, and merchant confirmations. And it stated clearly that I was prepared to escalate to court if necessary. She had expected me to stay quiet, to absorb it like always. But she didn't realize I'd been planning my silence for a reason. That spreadsheet, now printed and notarized, had become something more than proof. It was my voice, the one they all spent years tuning out. Back inside my apartment, I took off the blazer and opened the balcony door. The phone buzzed again. I turned it face down. Peace has a certain sound, like wind brushing against leaves or the absence of fake compliments. I stood there for a long time, not angry, not even satisfied, just settled. I had always thought that dignity was about holding it together, taking the hits and staying composed. But I was wrong. Dignity was about drawing the line, quietly and completely, even if no one clapped afterward. Especially then. Later that afternoon, I received a text from Denise. "Julian, I really wish you'd handled this privately. This isn't you." I stared at it for a while before replying. "It is me. You just didn't recognize me when I wasn't carrying everyone." An hour after that, Maribel messaged, "We need to talk. I feel ambushed." I didn't answer. I forwarded the message to my lawyer, just in case. Then I pulled up an old photo on my phone, one from years ago, at one of those family trips I paid for. Everyone was smiling, champagne in hand, eyes glinting with delight. I remember how broke I was that weekend, how I skipped meals just to make the numbers work. But in the photo, you'd never know. I looked grateful, or at least I thought I had to be. Now, looking at it, I saw something else. I saw a man who thought giving more would make him loved more. A man who thought sacrifice was a currency that bought respect. That man was gone. That evening, Maribel came home later than usual. She walked in quietly, not her usual high-heeled strut. She didn't say anything right away. She just placed her purse on the counter and hovered near the dining table. "So that's how we're doing this?" she asked finally. "You embarrassed me." I leaned back on the couch, not even looking up from my laptop. "No," I said. "I gave you a chance to fix it. You ignored me. You could have told me you were serious." "I did." "You laughed." She crossed her arms, her voice rising slightly. "It was just one dinner." I closed the laptop. "No, it was 10 years of dinners. This one just had a receipt too big to ignore." She didn't reply. She just stood there, blinking fast. "So what happens now?" I stood, walked past her, and said, "Now? You read every page of that envelope. And then we find out if you respect me enough to make it right, or if you just missed the access." I walked into the bedroom and shut the door. There's a difference between being loved and being tolerated. But when you grow up scraping for affection, sometimes you convince yourself they're the same thing. I was raised in a house with more silence than softness. My father was a mechanic who loved his tools more than people. My mother was kind but tear. By the time I was 10, I'd already learned how to fold laundry, fix a dripping sink, and keep my voice down when no one asked for my opinion. I became the dependable one early, the invisible glue that held things together quietly, without applause. So when I met Maribel, I thought I had finally found something different. She wasn't shy about attention. She walked into rooms like she owned the air. She had a family that celebrated everything: birthdays, brunches, even National Coffee Day. They hugged, they laughed, they complimented each other's outfits. It felt like walking into a dream where no one forgot your birthday or asked you to do your own cake. I didn't notice how everything came with an asterisk. Her father, Lawrence, liked to talk about the good old days. He wore cufflinks even when he didn't need to, and called me son, like it was a reward I had to earn. "You're a good kid," he'd say, "got that old school backbone." But he never reached for a bill when the check came. Not once. He had a dozen stories and zero investments. Her mother, Denise, mastered the art of the graceful request. "Julian, dear," she'd say, "you're so good with numbers. Could you just take a quick look at the venue deposit?" I'd smile, nod, and pay it before I even finished dessert. At first, I thought it was love. That this was just what people did when they cared for each other. Leaned in, lifted up, shared what they had. I figured I had more stability, more structure, and they had more sparkle. What's a few extra dollars in exchange for warmth? But over time, I realized it wasn't warmth. It was strategy. They'd built a family culture around gifting each other with things that didn't cost them anything: favors, borrowed time, shared responsibility. The actual cost? That always seemed to fall on me. I wasn't asked. I was expected. And when I hesitated, the air would change. Denise would tilt her head just slightly, like she couldn't believe I'd bring up something as crude as money. Lawrence would chuckle. "You're not counting pennies now, are you?" And Maribel, well, she'd look at me with that disappointed smile, like I was ruining the ambience. I once paid for a family cruise I didn't even attend. I had a work conflict, and they said it was too late to cancel the group rate. "But we understand," Denise texted. "Thank you for making it possible for everyone else." That sentence stuck with me. I wasn't a guest. I was the bank, and I accepted it for years. I told myself it was easier, that keeping the peace was cheaper than challenging the whole system. I didn't want to be the difficult son-in-law. I didn't want Maribel to feel embarrassed. I didn't want to lose the illusion that I finally belonged somewhere. But illusions are expensive, especially when you pay for them in silence. The night after the brunch incident, I sat at my desk and opened an old folder labeled Cross-Family Events. It was meant to be a joke once. A place to keep invoices, itineraries, all those logistics Maribel didn't want to deal with. But as I scrolled through the files, something turned in my stomach. Receipts, travel bookings, catering contracts, party supply quotes, and every single one of them had my name at the bottom. My card, my confirmation, my signature. I found one from 2 years ago, Denise's retirement toast. She didn't retire. She was temporarily furloughed and threw a party to mark new beginnings. It cost $4,800. I remember the exact number because I had to move a car payment to cover it. I asked Maribel if we could scale back. She smiled and said, "Babe, it's not about the money. It's about the memory." I wonder now if she remembers it at all. I spent hours cataloging every cost. I wasn't doing it out of pettiness. I needed clarity. I needed to prove to myself that I hadn't imagined it, that I hadn't just misunderstood generosity. Because for a long time, that's what I feared. That maybe I was just bad at love. That maybe giving until you broke was the point. But looking at those files, I finally saw it clearly. It wasn't love. It was leverage. And what made it worse, what made it feel like betrayal, was that no one ever asked if I was okay. No one noticed when I lost 10 pounds from stress one summer trying to balance a family vacation and a work merger. No one asked why I missed 2 full nights of sleep printing place cards for Denise's 60th. No one blinked when I used my bonus check to bail out Noelle after a failed business pitch. They all celebrated what I did for them, never who I was. I remember once, at a family dinner, Maribel raised a toast. She said, "To Julian, the man who makes everything work. We'd be lost without him." Everyone clapped. Denise gave me a fond look. Lawrence even patted my back. And I smiled. I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. But inside, I remember thinking, then why don't I feel seen? I thought of my own parents that night. My mother, who worked overnight shifts but still left me handwritten notes in my lunchbox. My father, who didn't say much, but once spent 4 hours helping me fix a busted bike chain in silence. They weren't expressive, but they were consistent. They gave me what they had. They didn't take without asking. They didn't twist gratitude into currency. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about identity, about how I allowed myself to be reshaped into something useful rather than respected. It's easy to say they were the problem, but I was the one who let it happen. I was the one who didn't say no. I was the one who mistook compliance for love. And now I had to fix it. Not with revenge, not with shouting, but with the kind of boundary that doesn't need to be announced, only enforced. I closed the folder and saved all the files to a password-protected drive. I titled it Chronicles, because that's what it was now. A story, one I was finally ready to rewrite. Maribel walked in while I was making tea. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, arms folded, I searching my face like she was looking for the old version of me. The one who didn't push back. The one who absorbed her family's whims like a sponge soaked in credit. "You've changed," she finally said. I stirred the tea slowly. "No. I've stopped pretending I didn't notice." She didn't like that answer, but she didn't argue. And I took that silence as the first honest moment we'd had in years. When Thea called, I almost didn't pick up. Her name lit up my phone just past 10 that evening, and I stared at it for a moment, unsure if it was real. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Not since she skipped Thanksgiving and everyone in the Cross family acted like she'd committed high treason. "She's always been dramatic," Denise had said. "She thinks being principled is a personality." But now, as the phone buzzed in my hand, I remembered Thea's quiet strength, the way she once squeezed my shoulder when no one was looking and said, "You don't have to keep playing their game." I answered, "Hello." A pause. Then her voice, steady and warm. "I heard what you did," she said. No small talk. No pretense. Just that. I said nothing at first. I didn't know how much she knew or who told her. But she went on. "Maribel's been calling people. Playing victim. You served her at brunch, huh?" I exhaled slowly. I didn't want a scene. I wanted a line drawn. She chuckled. "Well, darling, I just want you to know, I wish I'd done it first." I smiled without meaning to. It was the first time in days that someone said something without sugarcoating it, spinning it, or pretending they were shocked. Thea was never part of the circle, not really. She distanced herself years ago, back when Lawrence lost some of the family inheritance to a failed investment and tried to pin it on her advice. She walked out of a Sunday dinner, called them all liars to their faces, and never came back. Everyone called her bitter. I now called her sane. "I'm sorry it took me this long," I said. "No need for sorry," she replied. "Clarity comes when it's supposed to." "You're not crazy, Julian. You were just quiet. And quiet men are the easiest to miscast." She offered to meet for coffee. We met the next morning at a small cafe 2 blocks from her condo. No jazz music, no sparkling mimosas. Just black coffee and 2 people who didn't need to perform. She looked the same, gray streaks in her hair, a coat 2 sizes too big, a handbag older than my marriage. But she looked alive in a way Denise never had. She wasn't wearing masks. "I saved things," she said after our second sip. I know that sounds strange. But after the birthday blow-up 5 years ago, I started keeping records. Screenshots. Notes. It was like I needed proof that I wasn't crazy, either. She pulled a slim folder from her tote. Inside were photos, emails, even a letter from Denise that accused Thea of being hostile to tradition simply because she refused to pay for someone else's bridal shower. She handed it to me like it was a gift. I thumbed through the pages. "Why didn't you speak up before?" "I did," she said. "Just not loud enough to echo over champagne flutes. But that's okay. You're speaking now." We talked for hours. About the family, about patterns, about all the ways control can dress itself up in celebration. Thea told me stories of how Maribel was taught from a young age that manipulation was just another form of charm. "You weren't blind," she said. "You were conditioned. They praise you so long as you're useful. The moment you question it, they say you've changed." Those words hit hard. I thought of every moment I doubted myself. Every time I asked Maribel if something felt off and she said, "You're being sensitive." Every time I questioned a charge and she replied, "Why are you being so cold?" It was always a performance. The hurt tone, the wide eyes, the practiced pout. And I fell for it because I was desperate not to be the bad guy. But now, sitting across from someone who had chosen exile over enabling, I felt less alone. Thea wasn't bitter. She was clear. She hadn't lost her family. She had freed herself from a contract she never signed. And maybe, just maybe, I could do the same. "I need more than emotional validation," I said, pushing the folder gently toward my briefcase. "I need evidence. Patterns. Paper trails. I need this to be solid." "I have more," she said. "I figured you might come around someday. I've kept copies of party budgets, bank transfers, even a few voice notes." She looked at me carefully. You're not the only one who got burned, but you're the first who didn't pretend it didn't hurt. Later that evening, I emailed Ms. Roy, my attorney, and told her about Thea's archive. Start organizing them, she replied. We're going to build a paper wall so high, they'll have to climb over truth just to argue with you. Thea sent more files the next day. Invoices, group chat screenshots where Denise instructed family members to use Julian's card, he won't mind, and even a birthday group thread where Maribel bragged about getting $3K worth of vibes for free. I sat with those words for a long time. Worth of vibes. That's what I had become, currency for an aesthetic. But the most damning was a message Maribel sent to her cousin during the birthday planning. Don't worry about budget, she wrote. Julian always caves once he sees the candles. As if my heart were some switch she could flip with a well-timed smile. I printed everything and filed it neatly. Not for revenge, but because I needed to see it all in one place. Because sometimes the truth doesn't scream, it just sits there quietly, waiting to be read. And I read every line. That night, I texted Thea. Thank you. You didn't have to help. She replied within seconds. Helping isn't a burden when someone finally says no. That word, no, kept echoing in my head. A word I hadn't used enough. Not once, in all the years of gifts and guilt and gentle nudges toward the bill. I thought saying yes made me generous. Turns out, it made me invisible. I started practicing that word. Quietly, at first. I declined a dinner invite from Maribel's cousin. I ignored Denise's text asking if I could advise on a small renovation loan. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I just didn't. And the silence that followed was louder than any thank you I'd ever received. Thea sent me one last file that week, a recording from a brunch 2 years ago. Maribel was on speaker, talking to someone named Trisha. She was laughing. Julian's like furniture, she said. Always there, always useful, and you don't think about it unless it breaks. I paused the recording halfway through. Not out of shock, but recognition. That line, so flippant, so casual, summed up exactly what I had felt for years but never said aloud. I wasn't her partner. I was her prop. Until now. The first ripple hit the family group chat on a Tuesday morning. It started with Maribel's message, thinly veiled as a victim's lament. Some people really don't understand what it means to support your spouse's family. I gave everything I had, and now I'm being punished for it. The words dripped with injured pride. She followed it with a photo of the envelope I had her served with, held dramatically next to a cup of untouched tea. I stared at the screen for a moment before muting the chat entirely. What followed was exactly what I expected. Denise replied first with 3 angry face emojis, followed by, "This is absolutely disgraceful. Family should handle things privately." Lawrence chimed in with something about me, always being uptight. Noelle posted a single wow, as if the family group chat were an audience to impress. Then Camila wrote, "I'm sure Julian has his reasons, but this is cold." That one actually made me laugh. Camila, who hadn't spoken to me since I stopped making her car payments. Suddenly everyone remembered I existed, because I stopped paying to be invisible. I didn't respond. Not there. Not then. Instead, I gave them the one thing none of them were prepared for. Silence. The kind of silence that makes people uncomfortable. The kind that forces them to start questioning their own narrative. And while they flailed in their chat room performance, I was preparing something better. Something quieter. And much, much louder. Ms. Roy, my attorney, had just finished compiling the financial brief. 63 pages long, tabbed and itemized with laser clarity. Dates, dollar amounts, categories, screenshots, Venmo notes, text messages from Maribel asking for last-minute transfers for just a small spa thing with mom that turned out to be a full-day retreat with a private masseuse and catered lunch. I remembered sitting in the office that day, eating a protein bar at my desk, wondering if I'd be able to make the mortgage payment early to avoid interest. We prepared a digital file for review, password protected, traceable by view count. And then, I did the unthinkable. I sent it to the family group chat. No explanation. No rant. Just a one-line message. Since transparency matters, please see attached. And then the link. I didn't wait for replies. I shut off my phone, set it face down on the counter, and made myself lunch, an actual meal, not a granola bar. Chicken and rice. A glass of water with lemon. I ate in peace while the digital world exploded behind the screen. When I turned the phone back on 4 hours later, there were 87 unread messages. The first came from Denise. "How dare you send personal data to the group like that? You should be ashamed." The second from Lawrence. This is a private matter, Julian. You're dragging the family into your bitterness. Then Carmen, Maribel's younger sister, who usually stayed out of the family drama, sent a message that was just a shocked, "Wait, is all of this real?" She had opened the document. I could see the access log. She wasn't the only one. Every single family member had clicked it within the first hour. Some viewed it twice. Denise had opened it 5 times. Then came silence. That was when I knew it was working. The next move came from Lawrence. He sent me a long, overwritten email asking to meet for coffee. "Let's settle this like gentlemen," he wrote. "No need to involve lawyers over receipts." He attached a PDF of his own, an old wedding photo of Maribel and me, standing in front of that rented coastal villa I had paid for. As if nostalgia could erase a pattern of theft. I forwarded the email to Ms. Roy. She replied with 3 words, "Let them panic." The next day, Denise sent me a voice note. Her voice was tearful, exhausted, full of performative pain. "Julian, I can't believe you're doing this. We treated you like family. We trusted you. I just don't know who you are anymore." I saved the voice note, uploaded it to the drive, and labeled it Emotional Leverage Attempt Number 1. Then something I hadn't expected happened. Carmen messaged me privately. "I didn't know," she wrote. "I mean, I suspected. But this is a lot." I hesitated before replying, but she added another message before I could. "Maribel always made it sound like you just liked paying for things. Like it made you feel in control. That stopped me." Liked it? Is that how they saw me all along? A man who enjoyed being used? A walking wallet who mistook servitude for masculinity? I answered carefully. I did like taking care of people, but I never liked being lied to about it. She didn't reply, but I saw the message was read. That was enough. By the end of the week, word had spread beyond the group chat. A cousin I hadn't heard from in years DM'd me on social media. "Bro, that document was wild. Proud of you." A friend of Maribel sent me a message that just said, "Damn. You really showed them receipts. The whole situation had gone viral within their small elite bubble. Not because I made noise, but because the evidence was quiet and sharp, like glass. What none of them could process was this. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't cursed anyone out. I hadn't called names. I had simply let the facts talk. And facts don't blink." Maribel tried to regain control the following Sunday. She announced a small family dinner at her aunt's place. Her stated reason? To clear the air. To explain things before they get twisted further. Translation: she wanted to contain the fire. I was invited, of course. I RSVP'd yes. Not because I wanted an apology, but because I wanted them to say all the same things to my face, while the truth sat between us like a guest no one wanted to acknowledge. I arrived at the dinner early on purpose. I wanted to see who smiled out of habit and who hesitated when they saw me. The moment I stepped through the door, the energy shifted, not dramatically, not with gasps or silence, but with that subtle stiffness you only notice when everyone's pretending not to watch you. The Cross family had always been good at performance. But tonight, their lines were shaky. I could smell it. Something between rosemary and dread. The setting was typical. Long mahogany dining table, tapered candles, place cards with delicate cursive lettering. Gourmet aromas wafted through the room. Slow-roasted duck, garlic truffle potatoes, sautéed vegetables stacked like sculpture. Denise still believed food presentation could mend anything. Lawrence greeted me with a limp handshake, his other hand already holding a scotch. "Glad you made it," he said, voice a little too steady. "Let's just have a civil evening, huh?" I nodded. "Always civil, Lawrence." Denise came next, her expression painted on. "Julian," she said, "thank you for coming. We're hoping this can be productive." I didn't say anything, just walked past her and took my seat. Third from the head, where Maribel always used to place me. Not too close to power, not too far to seem unimportant. I saw her walk in a few minutes later. She nodded at me like I was a guest at a gallery opening, and I returned the favor. Dinner began with Denise raising a glass. "To family," she said, her voice too bright. "And to the strength we find when we face things together." I didn't raise mine. Just looked at my water glass and waited for someone to mention the document. They didn't. Not for the first hour. Instead, they tiptoed around it. Camila talked about a yoga retreat she was planning. Noelle shared something about a business venture in digital art. Even Carmen, usually the quiet one, tried to keep the mood light. But I could see the cracks forming. Their smiles twitched too often. They avoided eye contact. And every time someone mentioned money, the room tightened, just a little. Then, Halfway through the main course, Carmen showed up. Late, hair messy, eyes glossy. She was never one for polish, but tonight, she looked like she hadn't planned to come at all. Maribel shot her a look, one of those tight, warning glances only sisters can exchange, but Carmen ignored it and sat directly across from me. Sorry, she mumbled. Traffic. She poured herself a generous glass of wine. And then, without warning, she said, so are we just going to sit here pretending Maribel didn't brag about putting the whole dinner on Julian's card because he owed her for being boring? The silence that followed wasn't still. It was explosive in how still it tried to be. Denise froze mid-cut. Lawrence choked on a sip. Maribel's fork clinked too loudly as she dropped it. Carmen, Maribel hissed, what the hell? No, seriously, Carmen slurred slightly, her words wobbling but sharp. You told me. At brunch. Remember? You said, Julian's lucky I stayed with him this long. The least he can do is pay for a little vibe. My hands stayed in my lap. I didn't flinch. Didn't even smile. I just watched. You said he was like, what was it? A sponsor. Yeah, that you basically earned that dinner with all the years you spent pretending to enjoy his spreadsheets. Denise dropped her knife. That's enough, Carmen. No, Carmen said, leaning forward. Let's not shut down the truth, Aunt Denise. Isn't that why we're here? To clear the air. Maribel stood up then. Her voice cracked. You're drunk. Sure, Carmen said, waving her off. But I'm not lying. She looked at me, finally, and there was no pity in her eyes. Just a tired honesty I hadn't seen since Thea. I used to think you were just uptight. Too quiet. Too serious. But you were just trying to survive in a house full of mirrors. And with that, she slumped slightly in her seat, fork still in hand, a piece of truffle-top duck untouched and slowly cooling. Maribel didn't say another word. She sat down. Denise reached for her wine, but her hand was shaking. Lawrence mumbled something about dessert but didn't move. For a moment, the only sound was Carmen humming to herself, swaying just slightly, like she'd dropped a weight and was floating in the aftermath. I picked up my napkin, folded it cleanly, and placed it beside my plate. Well, I said softly. That was illuminating. Then I stood. No one stopped me. Maribel didn't look up. Denise stared at the tablecloth like she could erase the past with eye contact alone. Carmen had already slipped off one heel and was giggling to herself. I walked to the door, put on my coat, and stepped outside into the cold. The air was cleaner out there. Sharper. Like it didn't want anything from me. I took a deep breath and started the engine. The house behind me stayed lit, but quiet. No one came running. No one shouted after me. No one begged me to come back and talk. Because finally, for once, they all understood what it felt like to be speechless. And I didn't have to yell to make it happen. A week passed after the dinner, and the silence didn't just return, it matured. It became the kind of silence you can hear even in your sleep. Not hollow, not empty. Just finished. I didn't check the family group chat anymore. I didn't open Maribel's text bubbles, even when I saw the typing indicator blink for minutes before disappearing again. I didn't need to. We had passed the point where words could fix what facts had already exposed. The knock came on a Thursday afternoon, right as I was reviewing quarterly reports in my home office. I opened the door to find a courier standing there with a clipboard and a rigid-looking envelope. Certified delivery, he said, not even bothering to meet my eyes. I signed, took the package, and closed the door quietly behind me. I already knew who it was from. No return address. No frills. Just the embossed letterhead of Maribel's new attorney. I opened it at the kitchen table, slowly, methodically, like I had been trained to handle things that might try to hurt. Inside, a formal proposal. A payment plan. According to the letter, Maribel was offering to repay the full $15,274.88 over the course of 6 years, at a rate of $200 per month. The letter described it as a good faith gesture toward resolution and requested that I consider the history of shared life and contributions made outside of financial channels. I actually laughed. I hadn't laughed in days. Not since Carmen spilled her wine and the truth at the dinner table. But this was gall in a pantsuit. I imagined Maribel sitting in her lawyer's office, explaining her emotional contributions to my financial ruin like they were line items on a resume. I poured myself a glass of water and set the papers down beside my lunch. A tuna sandwich and kettle chips. The kind of modest, grounded meal I'd once been mocked for eating during Denise's luxury picnics. Julian's little lunches, they used to joke. So serious. So humble. It was meant to be cute. It wasn't. After eating, I scanned the documents and emailed them to Ms. Roy. Her reply came 2 hours later. Rejection sent. Revised counteroffer attached. Let's make it clear we're not playing games. The counteroffer was crisp and lethal. Full repayment within 90 days or we file for a lien on Maribel's future inheritance from the Cross family estate. The clause had been added quietly, thanks to a piece of information Thea had dropped during coffee. Turns out, Lawrence had set aside a property for Maribel and Carmen in his estate plan. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I approved the counter, signed it electronically, and returned to my work. That evening, while checking the door security camera, I noticed a woman standing outside my building's entrance at 9:43 p.m. Maribel, hair down, hoodie over her dress. Makeup smudged just slightly, like she'd been holding back tears but didn't want to let them fall. She didn't knock. She stood there for 3 minutes, staring up at the second floor, where my balcony light was still on. Then she pulled out her phone and left. The next morning, the video came in. Not a message. Not a call. A video. 38 seconds long. She was seated in her car, eyes red, the soft hum of traffic in the background. "Julian," she said, voice low. "No makeup now. Just her. Raw, or pretending to be. I don't know what I thought would happen. I guess I thought you'd yell, storm out, make a scene. Not this. Not this version of you I can't reach." She paused. "You've ruined everything, you know. Everything. My parents are furious. Carmen barely speaks to me. And I can't even walk into a brunch without people whispering." She wiped at her cheek. "You didn't just burn the bridge. You documented the fire." And then the screen went black. I watched the video once. Only once. Then I forwarded it to Ms. Roy, marked it as emotional manipulation attempt number 2, and closed the thread. I didn't reply. Because the truth is, I hadn't ruined anything. I just stopped playing along. For years, I'd made it easy for them to pretend I was okay with being the silent funder, the forgettable husband, the man whose name was never on the invitation but always on the invoice. I allowed it because I thought being a good man meant carrying weight no one saw. But they didn't respect the weight. They just added more to it. Now that I had put it down, they were furious. Later that night, I made a simple dinner, pasta with olive oil and basil, garlic bread on the side. I lit a candle, not because I was trying to be romantic with myself, but because I liked the way the flame moved when there was no wind. Steady. Like peace. Like resolve. After dinner, I pulled out a box I hadn't opened in years. It was filled with anniversary cards. Notes from Maribel written in her flowing, dramatic cursive. "To the man who gives and gives. I don't deserve you." I used to read that and feel proud. Now, it read like a confession. I threw most of them out. Not in anger. Not in bitterness. Just with the kind of quiet that follows a decision already made. By the end of the weekend, the Cross family had gone entirely silent. The group chat hadn't buzzed in days. Denise hadn't posted her usual Sunday brunch montage. Lawrence hadn't emailed a philosophical quote. Noelle hadn't DM'd me another crypto opportunity. Nothing. And for the first time in years, I realized what that silence meant. I wasn't just free of their noise. I was free of their reach. There's a sound to peace that you only recognize once you've lived without it for long enough. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't crash into your life. It just arrives, quietly, like closing a browser tab you've had open for years but never really looked at. The background noise is gone. The buzzing stops. And suddenly, you're just there, with yourself, without needing to perform for anyone. That was what life became in the weeks that followed. No more family group chats. No more unexplained credit card alerts. No more sideways glances across dinner tables, waiting for someone to hand me the check with a smile and a joke. The stillness felt strange at first, like I was walking through a familiar house after it had been emptied. Echoes of my old self clung to the walls, but the furniture was gone. I moved into a new apartment across town, smaller, cleaner, mine. No throw pillows with initials I didn't choose. No framed brunch photos I had no memory of enjoying. Just a space I could build from scratch. I set up my desk by the window, the balcony door cracked open enough to let in the sounds of the city. Every now and then, I'd hear traffic, a dog barking, someone laughing downstairs. Nothing that asked me for anything. And that, somehow, felt like wealth. I started doing small things I'd forgotten I loved. Cooking simple meals without trying to impress anyone. Taking walks without needing a destination. playing jazz records at night, not for a mood or a dinner party, but for myself. My job performance surged. My emails got sharper. My focus tightened. I stopped hesitating before speaking in meetings. I started investing time in myself, not just protecting other people's comfort. I canceled every joint account, every auto payment, every subscription Maribel had snuck onto my cards. I filed for removal as her emergency contact and designated my friend Alan instead, a man who once drove me to the hospital at 2 a.m. with a nosebleed and no complaints. The kind of loyalty that asks for nothing. The kind that doesn't show up with invoices dressed as gratitude. Aunt Thea mailed me a basket the following week. Not an e-card, not a text, a real basket. Cheese, wine, and a handwritten card that simply said, "Proud of you, nephew-in-law. It's okay to walk away from noise." I pinned it to my fridge. Not the basket, just the card. The fridge was still mostly empty, just leftovers and water, but that card made it feel like something sacred. One afternoon, I went to the bank to close the last joint account. The banker, a kind woman named Ruth, looked up from the screen and said, "Looks like you've cleaned house." "I have," I said, and I didn't even raise my voice. She smiled like she understood. Maybe she did. Maybe every quiet man who finally says, "No more," walks into a bank one day and deletes someone else's name from his life. Later that night, I sat on the couch with a book I hadn't touched in years. It was a gift from my father, a man of few words but sharp instincts. He'd once told me, generosity without boundaries is a slow kind of suicide. At the time, I thought he was just being cold. Now I saw it for what it was, a warning I had ignored. I read a few chapters, then stared out the window. The sun was setting over the rooftops, golden and slow. My phone buzzed once, an unknown number. I let it ring out. Peace isn't just about who you remove. It's about who you don't let back in. The apartment was quiet. No one asking what's for dinner. No one complaining that the charger was missing. No accusations of being too serious or too unavailable just because I had stopped performing miracles. Just me and a playlist I made years ago but never listened to. Track 4 was a Coltrane piece that felt like silk on bone. It played as I opened my laptop and archived an old folder titled Cross Family Finances. Not deleted, just shelved. I didn't need the evidence anymore. I had the outcome. I started journaling again. Not long entries. Just short, honest notes. Today, I bought groceries and didn't double-check the bank balance. Felt weird. Felt good. Didn't get any texts today. Didn't miss them. Aunt Thea says I sound lighter on the phone. I think she's right. I didn't need validation. I just needed record of how it felt to reclaim a self I hadn't known was missing until I heard the quiet of its return. Sometimes I still thought about Maribel. Not with longing. Not with hate. Just observation. A woman built for admiration. Not partnership. She was the kind of person who needed mirrors more than windows. And I had spent too long trying to be the frame. I wondered what she told people now. Probably that I changed. That I became cold. Maybe that I'd been planning revenge all along. It didn't matter. That part of my life had been a show I was never cast to star in. Just the producer footing the bill. And now, the curtain had dropped. One evening, Alan invited me over for dinner. A simple get-together. No performance. Just good steak and stupid jokes about our college years. His wife handed me a beer and said, "You look healthier." That word stuck with me. Not happier. Not wealthier. Healthier. Like I'd been sick and finally started healing. As I walked back home that night, I passed a bakery Maribel used to love. For a moment, I thought about stepping inside, seeing if the lemon tarts were still good. But I kept walking. Some doors don't need to be reopened just because they're unlocked. At home, I opened the fridge and smiled at the card from Thea. Then I reached for a bottle of wine, poured a single glass, and stepped onto the balcony. The city lights blinked like soft stars below. A cool wind brushed my face. I sat down, took a sip, and listened. No phones. No requests. No guilt dressed as gratitude. Just the sound of nothing needing me, and me not needing to explain why that was finally, beautifully okay. The last time I saw Maribel in person was at someone else's wedding. It wasn't planned. I wasn't even supposed to attend until my coworker Nate, one of the groomsmen, asked me to fill in for his brother who had dropped out last minute. I almost declined. I didn't like the idea of being around flowers and speeches about forever. But something told me to say yes. Not for the ceremony. For the clarity. The venue was a glass-walled event space downtown, just far enough from the city noise that you could pretend life was softer than it really was. Music floated through the air like perfume. Guests milled around in tailored suits and rented confidence, taking selfies in front of stringlet arches and ice sculptures shaped like swans. I kept my head down, adjusted my collar, and stayed near the back, close enough to witness, far enough to not be seen. Until I saw her. Maribel. She stood near the bar, laughing too loudly at something someone said, wine glass in hand, her dress hugging her frame with the kind of precision she used to claim was for me, but now I knew was never about me at all. Her posture was perfect. Her smile controlled. Her face, almost exactly the same, except for the eyes. The eyes gave it away. They didn't sparkle anymore. They blinked too slowly, like the weight behind them had grown heavier than the frame could carry. She didn't notice me. Not at first. But I watched her glance toward the entrance every few minutes, the way she used to when expecting a grand gesture. Amanda walked through the door with flowers. A compliment. A lifeline. And I realized she still hadn't learned. She was still waiting for someone else to carry the moment for her. A mutual friend noticed me and walked over. Julian, she whispered with a smile, I wasn't sure you'd come. I nodded. Wasn't sure either. Her eyes flicked toward Maribel before coming back to me. She's here, you know. I know. She looks different now, right? I didn't answer. Because it wasn't about how Maribel looked. It was about how I felt seeing her, and for the first time in years, I felt nothing. No ache. No pull. No shadow of guilt waiting to wrap around my chest and squeeze. Just stillness. Like watching a storm that had passed. You don't curse the wind after it's gone. You just rebuild. Quietly. Good for you, the friend said, almost under her breath. Most people don't escape. And then she walked away. Escape. That was the word. Not survive. Not win. Escape. Because when you're raised to believe sacrifice is noble, you forget that freedom is an option. You forget that love isn't supposed to feel like a mortgage with no deed in your name. You forget that you can leave and not owe anyone an explanation. Later in the evening, I stepped outside for air. The balcony overlooked the city, small lights, soft traffic, a hum of movement below me. I sipped my drink slowly, holding it with both hands like something sacred. The door behind me slid open. I didn't turn. I already knew. Julian. Her voice wasn't sharp or angry or pleading. It was tired. I turned slowly. She stood a few feet away, hair pulled back, no earrings, just that same tightness around the mouth I'd memorized over the years. I didn't know you'd be here, she said. I almost wasn't. We stood in silence for a beat. She stepped closer but didn't close the distance. I read everything, she said. The documents. The messages. All of it. I nodded. That's good. She looked down at her shoes. You didn't have to make it so public. I didn't, I said calmly. You did. When you handed my credit card to a waiter and toasted the entire family with my name at the bottom of the receipt. She flinched. I never wanted to hurt you, she said quietly. I tilted my head. You just didn't want to stop benefiting from me. Her eyes welled up slightly. But there was no apology coming. I could see that. Just regret that she no longer had access. I lost a lot, she said. So did I. She looked at me then, as if seeing me differently. Maybe for the first time. Not as her husband. Not as her fixer. Just a man. One she no longer had control over. One she couldn't buy with flattery or burden with guilt. You were always the calm one, she whispered. And you always mistook that for weakness. She looked away. People miss you. I don't miss them. Her lip quivered. Just slightly. Do you miss me? That was the moment I knew I had truly healed. Because I didn't pause. I didn't lie. I didn't soften the truth to protect her feelings. No, I said. I miss who I thought you were. But that person never existed. She blinked hard, nodded once, and backed away. I hope you're happy. I am, I said, with a clarity ID.